The milk bar scene wasn't just weird, it was illegal. Cast members got arrested. The lead actor nearly went blind. And Kubrick? He buried the film himself. Number 1, the Droog's language was a real academic nightmare. Anthony Burgess didn't just make up Nadsat for fun. The slang Alex and his Droogs speak? It's a fully constructed language mixing Russian, Cockney rhyming slang, and pure invention. Burgess was a linguistics professor, and he spent months crafting over 500 words. The studio panicked. They wanted subtitles. Kubrick refused. He forced audiences to learn by context, like being dropped into a foreign country. Malcolm McDowell spent weeks with a dialect coach just to get the rhythm right. The wildest part? Soviet censors who watched bootleg copies understood it better than English speakers, because half the words were bastardized Russian.
Got an idea how to comport yourself public-wise, oh my brother.
Horror show meant excellent. Devochka means girl. By the end of filming, the cast couldn't stop speaking it on set. Number 2, those eyelid clamps were real medical equipment. The Ludovico technique scene makes everyone squirm, and for good reason. Those metal contraptions holding Alex's eyes open? They're called lid locks, actual surgical tools used in eye operations. A real doctor was on set to apply them. Malcolm McDowell's eyes had to be anesthetized with drops every few minutes to prevent permanent damage. But here's what went wrong. During one take, the clamps scratched his cornea. McDowell was temporarily blinded and rushed to the hospital. Kubrick kept filming the next day. The terror in Alex's eyes during that scene? Not acting. McDowell later said it was the most painful experience of his career, and he still has vision problems in that eye. The drops you see being applied on screen? Those are real anesthetic drops being administered between takes. Number 3, the movie was rated X before anyone saw it. The MPAA took one look at the script and slapped it with an X rating before filming even started. Not for sex, but for the general tone of moral depravity. Kubrick didn't care. Warner Brothers definitely did. They begged him to soften it. His response? He made it worse. The rape scenes, the violence, the gleeful sadism. Every studio executive who watched the dailies felt physically sick. One Warner Brothers executive famously said, "We can't release this. We'll be murdered." But Kubrick had final cut in his contract. The film went out with the X rating intact, making it the most mainstream X-rated film ever released by a major studio. Theater owners were terrified. Some refused to show it. Others hired extra security, expecting riots. Number 4, Kubrick stole his own film from British theaters. Here's a twist nobody saw coming. After a year in British cinemas, Kubrick personally pulled his own movie. Not the studio. Not the censors. Kubrick himself. Why? Death threats. After several copycat crimes, including a brutal home invasion where attackers sang "Singin' in the Rain," Kubrick's family received detailed threats. Police advised him to leave the country. Instead, he did something unprecedented. He withdrew the film from all UK distribution. For 27 years, you couldn't legally watch A Clockwork Orange in Britain. Kubrick refused every request to re-release it. Bootlegs circulated like contraband. Film students took secret trips to France just to see it. It wasn't until after Kubrick's death in 1999 that his family finally allowed it back in British cinemas. An entire generation of Brits grew up knowing about a film they couldn't watch in their own country. Number 5. Malcolm McDowell destroyed his co-star's ribs. The home invasion scene was supposed to be choreographed. It wasn't. Kubrick told McDowell to just go wild while attacking Patrick Magee's character. McDowell took him literally. During the scene where Alex leaps on the writer, McDowell jumped with such force that he cracked Maggie's ribs. You can see the exact moment on film. Maggie's face contorts in genuine agony. But here's the thing. Maggie was actually paralyzed from the waist down, from a real car accident years earlier, and performed the entire film from a wheelchair. He couldn't move to protect himself. The pain was real, the fear was real, and Kubrick kept it all in the film. McDowell found out about the broken ribs only after shooting wrapped. He was mortified. Magee never complained on set. He was a stage actor who believed in pushing through. That primal scream when Alex attacks him? That's not acting. That's a man in real pain trying to finish the scene. Number 6. The entire film was shot with natural light, and it nearly killed the crew. Kubrick's obsession with natural lighting wasn't just artistic. It was pathological. He refused to use standard movie lights for most scenes. Instead, he shot with ultra-fast lenses originally developed by NASA for satellite photography. These massive lenses let him film by candlelight, streetlight, even moonlight. But here's what that meant for the crew. 18-hour shooting, days in freezing locations, waiting for the perfect natural light. The prison scenes? Shot in a real abandoned prison in winter with no heating. Cast members got hypothermia. The milk bar? Lit entirely by the fluorescent tables and walls, which gave everyone headaches after hours of exposure. Cinematographer John Alcott later said they'd shoot the same scene 50 times, waiting for clouds to pass. The crew started taking bets on whether they'd finish before sunrise. McDowell joked that he aged 5 years during the shoot. But those ethereal, dreamlike images, they came at the cost of everyone's sanity. Kubrick would sit in his car with the heater on, while actors froze between takes. If this behind-the-scenes chaos is already blowing your mind, trust me, we're just getting started. The really dark stuff hasn't even surfaced yet. Go ahead and subscribe if you want to see how deep this rabbit hole goes. Number 7. The singing in the rain scene was McDowell's idea, and it traumatized Gene Kelly. The most disturbing scene in the film, Alex's brutal assault while singing, wasn't in the script. Kubrick felt the scene needed something extra, something to make audiences truly uncomfortable. After multiple takes, he asked McDowell if he could dance. McDowell, exhausted and frustrated, started singing the only song he knew all the words to, "Singin' in the Rain." Kubrick's eyes lit up. He immediately drove to the nearest phone, called Warner Bros., and bought the rights to the song for $10,000. Gene Kelly was horrified. His wholesome musical number had been transformed into the soundtrack for ultraviolence. Kelly never spoke to Kubrick again. His widow later revealed that Kelly would leave the room whenever the film was mentioned. For years afterward, McDowell couldn't hear the song without feeling sick. He'd ruined a piece of cinema history, and he knew it. The scene was so effective that real criminals began copying it, singing cheerfully while committing violence. It became a calling card for sociopaths. Kubrick had taken innocence itself and painted it black. Number 8. David Bowie, Mick Jagger, and the Beatles all wanted to play. Before McDowell got the role, Kubrick's casting choices were insane. The studio pushed hard for David Bowie. He was young, beautiful, and dangerous. Kubrick met with him, but said Bowie was too otherworldly. Then Mick Jagger campaigned for the part, even offering to have the Rolling Stones do the soundtrack. Kubrick thought Jagger was too old at 27. But here's the weirdest one. The Beatles wanted to do A Clockwork Orange as their next film after Help. John Lennon would play Alex, Paul would be the prison chaplain, George the social worker, and Ringo the brutal Dim. They approached Kubrick in 1965, but he turned them down flat. He later said, "Can you imagine? It would have been a comedy." The role eventually went to McDowell after Kubrick saw him in If, where he played another violent youth. McDowell was actually 27 during filming, the same age as Too Old Jagger, but his boyish face fooled everyone. He wasn't even asked to audition. Kubrick just called him and said, "You're Alex." Number 9. Female cast members required armed guards. The film's treatment of women was so brutal that real-world consequences followed. The actresses playing rape victims received death threats from both sides. Conservatives who thought they were promoting depravity, and extremists who thought they hadn't gone far enough. Adrienne Corey, who played Mrs. Alexander, needed police protection after the film's release. But it gets darker. During the filming of assault scenes, Kubrick would clear the set of all non-essential crew, then spend hours getting the perfect take. Corey later revealed she felt genuinely traumatized, not from acting, but from repeating the scenes endlessly, while Kubrick experimented with angles. The actress playing the cat lady was so disturbed by her death scene that she refused to watch the finished film. Several female cast members formed an informal support group during production. They'd meet in secret to discuss their discomfort with how Kubrick was directing the violence. None of them spoke publicly about it for decades, fearing it would end their careers. The film's misogyny wasn't just on screen. It bled into the production itself. Warren Clark, who played Dim, later admitted the cast felt complicit in something genuinely disturbing. Number 10. Real criminals started copying the film, and Kubrick knew within months of release, police departments across England reported a spike in copycat crimes. The press called them Clockwork Orange attacks. Groups of young men dressed as droogs, speaking Nadsat, committing violence while humming classical music. The most horrific case, a 17-year-old Dutch girl was raped by a gang chanting "Singin' in the Rain." Her attackers explicitly told her they were recreating the film. A British teenager beat a homeless man to death wearing Alex's costume. When caught, he quoted dialogue from the film as his defense. By 1973, the copycat crimes had become an epidemic. British tabloids ran the numbers. Over 30 violent crimes directly inspired by the film in just 2 years. Prosecutors began using the film itself as evidence of intent. Kubrick received detailed police reports about each crime. Friends said he became paranoid, installing elaborate security systems at his home. He'd created something that escaped his control. Art that literally killed. The weight of those crimes is what finally drove him to pull the film from British cinemas. In private letters he wrote, "I never imagined life would imitate art so grotesquely." The darkness surrounding this film goes even deeper. What's coming next involves government conspiracies, missing footage, and a secret that Kubrick took to his grave. If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button, because the final facts will change how you see this film forever. Number 11. The British government secretly campaigned to ban the film. Declassified documents from 2004 revealed something chilling. The British Home Office ran a covert operation to suppress A Clockwork Orange. They didn't use official censorship. That would cause outcry. Instead, they pressured cinema owners, threatened licensing reviews, and planted negative stories in newspapers. Home Secretary Reginald Maudling personally wrote to police chiefs, asking them to document every crime that could be reasonably linked to the film. The goal? Build a case for banning it without seeming authoritarian. Internal memos show they considered prosecuting Kubrick himself under obscenity laws. MI5 reportedly kept a file on audience members who attended multiple showings. Local councils were encouraged to use public safety ordinances to block screenings. In one case, police in Hastings shut down a cinema mid-screening, claiming a fire hazard that didn't exist. The campaign worked. By 1973, over 30 British towns had effectively banned the film through bureaucratic warfare. When Kubrick withdrew it himself in 1974, the government had already won. They let him take the blame for censorship they'd orchestrated. The truth only emerged when Freedom of Information requests uncovered the conspiracy decades later. Democracy's response to dangerous art wasn't debate. It was silent strangulation. Number 12. Kubrick cut 30 minutes that have never been found. Here's something that will haunt film historians forever. The original cut of A Clockwork Orange was 30 minutes longer. Kubrick showed this version exactly once, to Warner Brothers executives in late 1971. Their reaction was so violently negative that Kubrick immediately destroyed the footage. Not stored, not archived, physically destroyed. He fed the film strips into an incinerator himself. What was in those 30 minutes? According to one executive who saw it, the content was unwatchable, beyond anything in the released version. Rumors persist about what was cut. An extended rape scene that made executives vomit, a sequence where Alex murders a child, political material about government mind control that was too real. Kubrick's editor, Bill Butler, confirmed the footage existed but refused to describe it, saying only, "Stanley made the right choice." The missing half-hour has become cinema's darkest legend. In 1991, a film collector claimed to have found fragments in an estate sale. Before anyone could verify them, his house burned down. Accident? Maybe. But Kubrick's paranoia about those scenes followed him to his death. He allegedly told his wife to ensure they were never reconstructed from notes or scripts. Whatever was in those 30 minutes, Kubrick decided humanity wasn't ready to see it. Number 13. Malcolm McDowell was blacklisted for playing Alex. Playing Alex DeLarge destroyed Malcolm McDowell's career for nearly a decade. He thought he'd created an iconic villain. Hollywood saw him as unemployable. Directors wouldn't meet with him. Studios excluded him from auditions. One casting director told him bluntly, "Nobody wants to see a rapist as their romantic lead." Between 1972 and 1979, McDowell went from Kubrick's muse to box office poison. He was forced to take exploitation films and B-movies just to pay bills. Lindsay Anderson, who'd directed him in If, logically said McDowell had committed career suicide. The typecasting was so severe that McDowell developed a drinking problem. He couldn't walk down the street without people shouting "Nadsat" at him or cowering in mock fear. Women would cross the street to avoid him. Parents pulled their children away. The role that should have launched him to stardom instead made him a pariah. It wasn't until 1979's Time After Time that Hollywood gave him another chance, playing H.G. Wells, the gentlest character imaginable. McDowell later called it 8 years in movie jail. The irony? Today he's beloved for playing Alex, but he paid for that performance with the prime years of his career. "I became the monster," he said, and monsters don't get happy endings. Number 14. The film predicted government behavioral modification programs that actually happened. Here's the fact that should terrify you. A Clockwork Orange wasn't science fiction. While Kubrick was filming, the CIA was running MK Ultra, a real program using drugs, electroshock, and psychological torture to modify behavior. The Ludovico technique in the film, the CIA had already tried versions of it. Dr. Ewan Cameron in Montreal was destroying patients' minds with massive doses of LSD and electroconvulsive therapy, trying to rebuild their personalities. The British government ran similar programs at Porton Down, using soldiers as guinea pigs. When the film was released, several psychiatrists secretly contacted Kubrick, asking where he'd gotten his information. He hadn't known about the classified programs. He'd simply imagined what governments might do with behavioral science. By pure accident, he'd exposed real horrors. In 1975, when MKUltra was partially declassified, journalists noticed the similarities immediately. The film's fictional treatment looked tame compared to reality. Victims of real government mind control experiments later cited A Clockwork Orange in lawsuits, saying it proved the public would have believed them earlier. Kubrick was reportedly shaken to learn his dystopian fantasy was actually happening. He'd meant to warn about a possible future. Instead, he'd accidentally documented the present. Some investigators believe he knew more than he admitted, that sources had fed him information. We'll never know. But the film remains the most accurate depiction of government behavioral modification ever made, because it was already real. Number 15. Anthony Burgess hated the film and tried to suppress his own novel. The author who created A Clockwork Orange spent the last 20 years of his life trying to destroy it. Anthony Burgess wrote the novel in just 3 weeks, believing he was dying of a brain tumor. He wasn't. He considered it a minor work until Kubrick made it immortal. Then Burgess turned against his own creation with stunning venom. He called the film a gross misrepresentation that missed the entire point of his book. Kubrick had cut the final chapter, where Alex naturally outgrows violence and chooses goodness. Without it, Burgess said, the story became a glorification of evil. He began refusing to sign copies of the novel. At public readings, he'd tell audiences not to buy it. When universities taught it, he'd write angry letters to professors. He even tried to buy back the rights from publishers to take it out of print. The money from the film made him rich, but he donated most of it to charity, calling it blood money. In a 1985 interview, he said, "I created a monster, and Kubrick gave it life. Now, I watch it destroy everything I meant to say." The success of A Clockwork Orange overshadowed everything else Burgess wrote. Over 30 novels, all forgotten. On his deathbed in 1993, he allegedly told his wife, "I wish I'd never written that damned thing." The creator died hating his most famous creation, a perfectly clockwork irony. Number 16. Warner Brothers executives physically fought over releasing the film. The boardroom battle over A Clockwork Orange turned literally violent. In November 1971, Warner Brothers held an emergency meeting about whether to release the film. Half the executives wanted it buried, the other half smelled money. The argument escalated until production chief John Calley allegedly threw a punch at distribution head Leo Greenfield. Security had to separate them. The fight wasn't about artistic merit. It was about survival. Several board members had received death threats just from industry screenings. Catholic groups were already organizing boycotts. The MPAA threatened to create a new rating beyond X just for this film. Ted Ashley, the studio president, watched the film once and reportedly said, "We're going to hell for this." But the younger executives saw dollar signs. They knew controversy sold tickets. The meeting lasted 9 hours. At one point, someone suggested burning the negative and collecting insurance. Kubrick had to be conference called to remind them about his contractual final cut. The vote to release was decided by a single person, Steve Ross, who owned Warner Communications. He hadn't even seen the film. He just looked at projected box office numbers and said, "Release it." That one decision changed cinema history. Without Ross's greed overruling caution, A Clockwork Orange would have been locked in a vault forever. The executives who fought against it were quietly reassigned. John Calley, who threw the punch defending the film, was promoted. Violence, it seems, worked on both sides of the screen. Number 17. The milk bar drugs were real, and the cast got legitimately high. The Korova milk bar served Milk Plus, milk mixed with drugs. During filming, the cast assumed the bottles contained regular milk with food coloring. They were wrong. Kubrick, ever the perfectionist, had the prop department add real substances to create authentic reactions. Not hard drugs, but various legal stimulants, mild hallucinogens from health food stores, and caffeine concentrations that would be illegal today. Malcolm McDowell discovered this only after drinking multiple takes worth and feeling his heart racing. The other droogs reported similar experiences. Warren Clark couldn't sleep for 2 days. James Marcus had mild hallucinations. The effects were subtle enough that actors thought it was just adrenaline from performing. Kubrick never told them. It wasn't until the wrap party that a prop assistant, drunk and guilty, confessed what they'd been drinking. The cast was furious, but couldn't prove anything. Kubrick had been careful to use only legal substances. McDowell later said it explained why those milk bar scenes felt so genuinely unhinged. We weren't acting high. We were high. The studio never found out. If they had, the insurance liability would have shut down production. Kubrick had literally drugged his actors without consent to achieve the perfect, unsettled energy. Even by 1970s standards, it was an outrageous violation. But watch those scenes again. The glazed eyes, the twitchy movements, the barely controlled energy. That's not method acting. That's chemistry. Number 18. A secret society of fans kept the film alive during its UK ban. When Kubrick pulled A Clockwork Orange from British cinemas in 1974, he created an underground phenomenon. Secret societies formed at universities to screen bootleg copies. They called themselves droog clubs and operated like resistance cells. Members used Nadsat as code language. Meeting locations were distributed through cryptic messages in student newspapers. The most famous was at Cambridge, where future Python member Eric Idle allegedly ran monthly screenings in college basements. Police occasionally raided these gatherings, confiscating prints and equipment. Getting caught meant expulsion, but the screenings continued for 25 years. The bootlegs came from everywhere. French prints with English subtitles, grainy VHS copies taped from American cable, even Super 8 versions shot off theater screens. Quality didn't matter. Seeing the forbidden film did. One Oxford group created an entire ritual. Audiences, dressed as droogs, drank milk, and recited dialogue in unison. By the 1990s, these secret screenings had become tradition. When the film was finally re-released in 2000, many British critics had already seen it dozens of times illegally. The ban had created the opposite of its intent. Instead of killing the film, it made it mythical. A generation of British filmmakers cite those illegal screenings as formative experiences. Danny Boyle saw it at 16 in a Glasgow warehouse. Christopher Nolan watched it in a Cambridge dorm. The forbidden fruit had grown into an entire tree, nourished by the very act of suppression. We're approaching the final revelation, the fact that Kubrick himself called the ultimate irony. If you've made it this far into the darkness, you need to hear how this story ends. Subscribe now, because the bonus fact will reveal the secret Kubrick hid in plain sight for 50 years. Number 19. Russia banned the film for being anti-Soviet propaganda, while also claiming it proved capitalism's decay. The Soviet response to A Clockwork Orange was schizophrenic brilliance. Officially, They banned it as anti-Soviet propaganda because of the Russian-influenced Nadsat slang. They thought Burgess was mocking the Russian language and, by extension, Soviet culture. But simultaneously, Communist Party publications wrote extensive analyses of how the film perfectly depicted the inevitable decay of capitalist society. They screened it secretly for party officials as educational material about Western moral collapse. KGB documents declassified in 1991 revealed they spent significant resources analyzing whether Kubrick was a CIA asset using subliminal messaging. The paranoia went so deep that they investigated Russian expatriates who'd helped Burgess develop Nadsat, suspecting them of being double agents. Meanwhile, bootleg copies circulated through the Soviet underground faster than in Britain. Moscow film students passed around ninth-generation copies that were barely visible. The irony was lost on no one. A film about authoritarian mind control was being simultaneously suppressed and celebrated by actual authoritarians. Soviet director Andrei Tarkovsky saw it illegally and called it the most Soviet film ever made by the West, a comment that could have gotten him arrested. When the film was finally shown legally in Russia in 1991, after the fall of the USSR, audiences laughed at different scenes than Western viewers. They recognized the bureaucratic doublespeak, the institutional sadism, the gap between official reality and lived experience. As one Russian critic wrote, Kubrick thought he was warning the West. He was actually documenting the East. Number 20. The final chapter changes everything, and almost nobody has read it. Here's the twist that reframes the entire film. Kubrick deliberately cut the last chapter of Burgess's novel, fundamentally changing the story's meaning. In the original ending, Alex naturally outgrows violence. He meets Pete, a former droog now married with a normal job, and realizes he wants a family. No conditioning, no treatment, just natural maturation. He chooses to abandon ultraviolence because he's simply grown up. This chapter existed in every edition except the American one, which Kubrick used as his source. When Burgess told him about it, Kubrick refused to add it, saying it was too optimistic. But here's what nobody discusses. Kubrick knew exactly what he was doing. He turned a story about natural redemption into one about cyclic violence and social control. Burgess spent decades furious about this betrayal, but Kubrick never apologized. In a rare 1980 interview, he explained, "The 21st chapter is false hope. In reality, violence doesn't end with maturity. It just becomes institutional." He'd transformed Burgess's humanistic parable into something far darker, a vision where violence is yong heng eternal, where growing up just means finding legal ways to be brutal. The cured Alex at the film's end, fantasizing about violence while government officials applaud, was Kubrick's real message. Not that violence can be cured or outgrown, but that it's inherent to power itself. The missing chapter wasn't an oversight. It was an assassination of hope, executed with surgical precision. Bonus fact: Kubrick hid his own confession in plain sight for 50 years. In 2019, a film researcher discovered something that changes everything about A Clockwork Orange. During the scene where Alex browses records in the music store, he flips past an album that appears for exactly 2 seconds. The soundtrack to 2001: A Space Odyssey. But look closer. The album cover has been altered. Where it should show the film's title, Kubrick had the prop department change it to read 2001: A Clockwork Odyssey. For decades, this was dismissed as an in-joke, Kubrick referencing his previous film. But when enhanced and examined, researchers found something else. In tiny print where the track listing should be, there's Message, I have become the monolith, SK1971. This wasn't random. Throughout his career, Kubrick was obsessed with the monolith from 2001. That black slab that triggers human evolution through violence. The ape learns to kill and becomes human. Now think about A Clockwork Orange. Alex is evolved through violence. Society responds with violence. The cure is violence. The film itself became Kubrick's monolith, a black object that changes whoever encounters it, that transforms audiences through shock and horror. He'd hidden his artistic confession in a 2-second shot. He hadn't just made a film about violence. He'd created a violent object, a cinematic weapon designed to evolve or destroy whoever watched it.